I think I will speculate a little bit on about our history. In some sense, the whole of this conference is about the Great Eastern Ranges and the family to which it relates. I thought it might be of some benefit to talk about how we began. But to remind you, as Jamil has just done in the African context, and as Brendan Mackey and Gary Tabor did yesterday, that it is now really quite clear that the crises that this world faces in climate change and species extinction simply cannot be abated without initiatives that will protect and connect and regenerate our landscapes and ecosystems at a large landscape scale. Nevertheless, oh, can I have the second slide? Nevertheless, it takes years and years to build momentum and to create a framework for the wide-ranging community involvement you need if you are to sustain an initiative of that sort. Someone just change the... Thank you. Having a bit of a smoko, yeah. But it's the next one. Next slide, please. I think we've missed one. There, that's the one. Thank you. The Great Eastern Ranges builds on the thinking and the vision of the late Dr. Graham Warboys, a very great friend to a lot of people in this room. I first met Graham Warboys, this is hard for me to believe, but I first met Graham Warboys in 1981 in Blackheath in the Blue Mountains. I was at that time a rather inexperienced member of Parliament, and Graham was a precociously young superintendent of the Blue Mountains National Park. And he told me at that time that he had an ambition that we might be able to make a national park from the Blue Mountains 500 kilometres south to the border of Victoria, where there were some more national parks, by the way. That was 50 years ago. He had that kind of idea. The Great Eastern Ranges is significantly his vision, but it's not only Graham's. I've been reflecting that, in fact, the Great Eastern Ranges has depended upon a substantial group of people who had kind of intellectual connectivity. You've been hearing from some of them, Brendan Mackey, Virginia Young, directors of those of you who were here yesterday heard speak. They are directors of the Great Eastern Ranges. Several of the panellists that are to follow are either board members of the Great Eastern Ranges or members of our sister organisation, Gondwana Link. Gary Howling has been associated with the Great Eastern Ranges since it began. Okay, Gary Howling has personified the Great Eastern Ranges idea. And on the right-hand side, as you see it, are some maps associated with something that was called the National Wildlife Corridors Plan of 2012. I put this up partly in response to the challenge offered by Gary Tabor yesterday morning, who swore about our policy responses in Australia in the last decade. The National Corridors Plan was actually the first national plan for connectivity, an Australian government framework to restore and manage ecological connections in the landscape anywhere in the world. It was passed by Cabinet in November 2012 and written by some of us. But in 2013, Australia had suffered the first of what has later appeared to be the Anglo-Saxon curse. It got a complete bloody idiot as a Prime Minister. And the new government the new government simply abandoned the National Wildlife Corridors Plan. But I pledge to you today that the Great Eastern Ranges, assisted by as many people as we can muster in this room, is going to advocate to the new Minister for Environment in this country for the re-establishment of that plan. Next slide, please. The GER vision is to bring people together to protect, connect, restore healthy landscapes across 3,600 kilometres of eastern Australia. And that initiative actually began in 2007. And I've got some notes here written by Ian Pulsford, yet another one of our directors, yet another person who's been associated always with the Great Eastern Ranges. And he was in 2007 an officer of the Department of National Parks and Wildlife Service of New South Wales. This is what he wrote. Graham Wellboys and Ian Pulsford have been working on the idea of a connectivity corridor along the Great Dividing Range and the Great Escarpment of southern New South Wales since the mid-1990s. A great step forward towards achieving the vision was delivered through the establishment of a conservation corridor of 600 kilometres, almost completely linking protected areas from the Hunter Valley, north of Sydney, to the Victorian border, after a massive forest assessment and settlement. It's a long time ago now, but an elaborate process which meant that a large number of national parks were created in areas of highest conservation value. It was part of a national process, but the anchor area, the anchor of the national parks south from Sydney to the Victorian border was the beginning of the process that Graham and Ian worked on. And in October 2006, Ian presented a proposal for the establishment of a wildlife corridor from the Australian Alps to Atherton. We called it A2A to the Minister. The Yellowstone to Yukon initiative in the US and Canada, that is the initiative for large-scale landscape conservation, that is the work essentially of Gary Tabor, who was speaking to us yesterday, and the Canadian friend of ours, Harvey Locke. That provided insights and inspiration. Pulsford and Wellboys developed a business plan. In March 2007, the Minister announced that this corridor was to be established after meeting with other environment ministers around the country and initially provided money for that. There was actually an understanding that the scientific basis for connectivity conservation prioritisation would be examined and established, and that was indeed the case. Brendan Mackey, again, was one of the scientists who did that. The Minister was me, yeah. But in the years that followed, obviously the Great Eastern Ranges has developed, grown and become an independent NGO and encompasses the great span now between Tasmania and, we hope soon, Cape York. I remind you that more than half of the threatened plants and species on this continent and the majority of the human population are within that corridor. People, we have always understood, are at the heart of this vision. Landscape restoration initiatives can only be as strong as the people and the communities that support them. So from the beginning, GER has adopted a regional partnership model that brings people together at a local level to undertake community-driven connectivity projects. And this is a model that obviously empowers communities to ensure that their projects meet local needs. If we build long-term inclusive partnerships, we provide a platform that can deliver a coordinated effort at a regional level while creating corridors of impact across multiple landscapes. And the result of those efforts can be seen in places. Get the next slide, thank you. This is a map of an area that we call Womargama to Benambra. It's on the New South Wales Victorian border. It's undertaken by partners in the regional alliance that we call Slopes to Summit, and it's designed to assist the threatened squirrel glider by connecting private and public land efforts that link the landscape into an effective corridor of effort, as I say, from the slopes of Mount Kosciuszko, indeed, to the inland woodlands. And again, the next slide. This is of an area, I don't know that you can see it too clearly, sorry, but this is a corridor that we called Canangra to Wangla on the New South Wales Central Tablelands, which involves multiple local connections that in turn aggregate to better connect a natural altitudinal corridor between the Greater Blue Mountains and, again, the inland woodlands. The GER Planting for Pollinators program is then taking this effort to another level, linking efforts across landscapes and regions to enable wildlife to adapt and move and survive across really vast distances. Play the video if you would, please.
Over the past 250 years, humans have removed lots and lots of habitat up and down the Great Eastern Ranges corridor.
Our family feel a responsibility to be custodians for this land and make sure that future generations can see that we have tried to rehabilitate what we inherited. One of the first things you notice about this incredibly beautiful part of New South Wales is the biodiversity that's in the township itself. The Flying Fox camp, which is in the middle of the town of Bellingen, is really quite extraordinary. Tens of thousands of bats can be seen emerging from the camp. However, when we bought our property here in Glenafell, it was in one of the worst droughts we've had in many decades, and our flying foxes were seen visiting some of the communities outside of the camp area. So seeing individuals all day looking for something to eat was quite distressing. So we've been planting and removing weeds for many years so that we can provide the kind of habitat that the flying foxes in this area need.
My name is Peggy Eby. I'm an ecologist, and I've spent most of my career studying the flying foxes of southeastern Australia. I've tracked them through time. I've watched females have young, raise their young, and then leave, migrate to new roosts, often long distances away. They are fascinating animals, highly intelligent. These animals play a vital role in the pollination functions that occur over large areas within southeastern Australia. They're actually connecting fragmented habitats, and they are in need of particular conservation attention.
Planting for pollinators is ensuring there's enough connected habitat for species such as grey-headed flying foxes to live in and move up and down the entire Great Eastern Ranges corridor to ensure that they can do their task as an ecological engineer. So it's important to provide enough food for species such as grey-headed flying foxes and region honeyeaters and swift parrots, and all of those pollinators to ensure that they're able to move easily up and down their range, but also enough food to allow them to pollinate. All of the work we do is based on robust science. So in our work in planting for pollinators, we ensure that we're putting trees and plants back into the ground in habitats to which they belong. And part of the work of the Great Eastern Ranges is to ensure there are enough places to live as climate changes for everything.
People are now starting to put the biodiversity, the really amazing trees, back into the landscape. So flying foxes have a permanent food supply right through the valley of Bellingen. So next time we have a drought, or next time we have a bushfire, that we have the biodiversity in our forests to ensure that they have a food supply 12 months of the year.
By planting and re-establishing the winter and spring flowering trees needed by these animals, we're also assisting koalas because they rely on the leaves of those same species. By taking part in the Planting for Pollinators program, people are not only helping to conserve wildlife, they're also helping to conserve the forests of southeastern Australia, particularly in the face of ongoing environmental change.
Thank you. Just the last slide, thank you. So, for the future, the Great Eastern Ranges seeks to adopt strategies and methods that work to make a corridor of effort to reconnect the habitats that make up one of the world's great corridors of life. We seek to prevent the destruction of what's left of our unique and vital natural heritage, and actually there's a lot of that along the Great Eastern Ranges. Be bold and innovative in our attempts to reconnect and restore landscapes at scale, to empower people and make them part of the solution, to build new collaborations that engage across different sectors and involve people from all walks of life and interest groups, and to coordinate efforts so that they become a whole that is more than the sum of the parts. Thank you.